Welcome to God with George Ortega and Joshua Bond. This is episode number 12. We're recording on November 6th, 2020 at 12:47 p.m. Eastern Time. And today we're going to continue exploring the illusions we have about God, the illusions we have about ourselves and about reality. So, all right, Josh, start us off.
Certainly. So, just as we've discussed previously, this belief, this false belief in the illusion of free will that so many religions have unfortunately gotten wrong, or better perspective is they've evolved our consciousness to get to the point where we can understand that free will is an illusion. And today we're going to be talking about how that relates specifically to human relationships. So if we don't have a free will like we think we do, like our ego tells us we do, like science has now debunked, then what does that say about our relationships? What does that say about understanding the causal nature of the relationships? And all of this, of course, is God, because this is an episode, this is a series all about God, and God is the causal mechanism in the universe. If you define God as the Bible does, as most sacred scripture and texts do, then we start to realize that God is this causal mechanism, not just the creator of everything, but the causal mechanism of how that creation plays out. So this includes the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of the universe, which also includes the laws that govern what it means to be human. And this is what psychology, sociology, and religion as well has done such a good job at trying to figure out how do we have the best relationships possible, because when we have good relationships with each other, we have a good relationship with ourselves, and all of that is contributing to our relationship with God. So I think starting out with this, I'd like to read real quick this excerpt from George's book here, Exploring the Illusion of Free Will, second edition, where he very intuitively realizes the most important thing we need to do, first of all, is arrive at a shared definition of free will. So free will, as social scientists and philosophers define it, is generally defined as human beings being free to think, feel, say, and do whatever we want, regardless of to whom we were born, how they were raised, where we were born, where we grew up, what we learned in school. And he's got a whole list of reasons that that's absolute nonsense, right? And so today I think we're going to focus on this kind of illusion of free speech is a way to think of it, right? This illusion that, we have relationships with each other, and today we're so fortunate, we're so blessed that, in thousands of years ago, we may have been trying to kill each other or hurt each other physically. Now we're in a contextual relationship with each other, right? And so what we say, this ability to be free to say whatever we want, if we say the wrong thing, if we accidentally slip, if, whatever it is, that we should, that means that we're a sinner, we're an evil person, it destroys the relationship, whatever. And when we understand these core spiritual principles about the illusions, then it can radically transform our relationships, how we view each other and ourselves. So today I think we'll focus a lot on specifically the human relationship part of this illusion of being able to say the best thing, and also being able to refrain from saying the wrong thing, as if we're God and we know everything and we created everything. And that's absolutely, obviously not the case. So take it away, George.
All right, so two people are having a conversation, okay? Under this current paradigm, this, idea that what we say is up to us, both people are concluding that what they are saying and what the other person is saying is completely up to them. And the reality is, no, it's not complete. It's not in any sense, in any real sense, up to either of them. And so basically, we're basically, what is it up to? Who is it up to? It's up to God. This consciousness that we have, in other words, like somebody's saying something to us, we're listening. That listening, what we hear is up to God. And then what we say in response is up to God. This is very important to understand. Josh, take us through how understanding this helps us when sometimes like we're in an interaction, a conversation where there's a difference of opinion, a disagreement. You know, how does like just understanding the true nature of this conversation, and does understanding that it's really all God manifesting through us help people just navigate their conversations and interactions better?
Certainly, George. So, one of the most obvious ways is we have this concept of subjectivity versus objectivity, right? And we realize that everybody has a different subject experience, and this is where the whole controversy or the the struggle with semantics, right, come in. And so the first step is probably obviously to realize that the subjective experience of the conversation of the other person is different from yours. And right there, that should be a huge spiritual awakening, right? That I don't think, religions drive home enough, that, it's what I call the illusion of consciousness, this ability to think and feel, this emotional conscious experience is not up to us. It's up to God, right? And if we don't understand that, then we are in this mindset of, oh, I feel this way, I think this way, I'm interpreting these words this way, I'm having this emotional experience. So the other person, must be thinking the exact same thing. And not only that, they might be responsible for if I feel bad, right? When they may be in a happy mood, they may be trying to communicate something positively and trying to cheer you up, but maybe they're not very good at cheering you up. They went through 13 years of public school and they never learned how to actually cheer up another human being. How ridiculous is that, right? So that subjective objective experience. And I think again, this is we have training, we understand the value of education in so many contexts, but not in this context. And we're so deprived. We really still live in the dark ages when it comes to this illusions, this spirituality, this understanding of, causality, and by extension of God, a relationship with God as the causal mechanisms of that, and being able to love ourselves and be in relationship with each other out of just, wanting to be there because we love ourselves and because we want to love the other person. And psychology, psychiatry, philosophy should all be integrated into the spirituality of understanding causality and understanding of God, right? So, we have this concept in psychology of the subconscious, the unconscious, the shadow projection, the id, the ego, the super ego, right? Kind of this child stuck in us, this adult, this child stuck in us, this overbearing parent, and this adult, that's kind of stuck in between. And all of these things are causal. We're biopsychosocial spiritual creatures, and we have to understand that we are not in full control of our causality, like we've been taught to think, and we've been taught to blame ourselves and each other. And for me, this has been a radically spiritually transformative realization. I hope others can really feel this and feel the power of it and continue to seek it out.
All right, so basically, things are not up to us. What we feel isn't up to us, and obviously, what we say based on what we feel isn't up to us. So we're saying that it's up to God now. So, like, if I understand you correctly, basically, what you're saying is like it creates problems. In other words, that we have failings as human beings. We're not perfect. We have flaws in various ways. If one person, for example, in an interaction isn't able to, let's say, cheer up another person, or isn't able to say whatever it is that the other person wants to hear or needs to hear, under this current paradigm, there's blame, and then the blame usually goes back and forth. The one person is blaming the other person for their failings, they're blaming the first person for their failings. And so what happens is, when we understand that this is really a conversation that God is having with God. I mean,
Yeah.
This is like, yes. So basically, imagine God as a puppeteer. I mean, this is, I think, a great analogy. This came to my mind, and I didn't think of it. God just gave me this idea, right? So imagine like God is a puppet show, and like one of the people is like God's one puppet, and the other, and God is just it's a puppet show. I mean, it really literally is. So anyway, so like what happens? All right. So like that's what's happening. Basically, God is making people not just say what they say in a conversation, but feel what they feel. In other words, like when one person, let's say, doesn't say the right thing and the other person becomes angry with them, God is making that happen. That's God's show that we're in, okay? And again, we're, ordinarily in acting, we get to choose at least how to portray our character. A director gives actors some leeway in how to how to express the character. With this, with God as the puppeteer, we don't even get that. every minute aspect of how we express ourselves, what we say, and how the other person reacts, of course, is up to God. It's interesting. Josh, you mentioned, so like, obviously, when we understand that and like, there is a conflict, obviously any kind of like hate that we feel, we're not going to feel toward the other person, any kind of like negative, aggressive emotion. If we get that other person and we are both puppets, literally, well, yeah, literally, I guess, God is the puppeteer, really. Then we, I guess, we'll try not to be angry with God, but we'll address that negative judgment, that blame, whatever, for God. But the reason I'm mentioning this, Josh, is because then you kind of like said, well, this helps us to love each other more, and see, like, I mean, yes, but the other thing which is very ironic in this is like, just as like we don't really any longer have a rational basis for hating each other, we really don't have a rational basis for loving each other either. Now, so like, I mean, I've got an answer to this, but why do you think we still want to, be somewhat irrational in this and love each other, even though it's really God whom we're loving?
Sure, George. This is an abstract concept. Let me see if I can tackle it here. I think this is, from my own personal experience, this is why I accepted your invitation to do this show on God, coming from, a deeply religious background, being a missionary, and then realizing that there was so many falsehoods and so many, ironically, evils in my mainstream, Protestant religion I was practicing. And that got me into atheism, agnosticism, and atheism, and all schools of thought, right? And then coming back around to realize that, what else is there, right? What, as humans, it's kind of our highest aspiration to understand God and spirituality. And, it's as simple as this, to make it really simple. I don't enjoy pain. I don't like to suffer. And, from all the studies of happiness, all the surveys of people, nobody does, right? And so, if I don't like that, why would I think somebody else likes that, right? And this comes back to this other spiritual concept of oneness that you talk about a lot. And, and religions deal with this differently. There's the aspect of karma, the concept of karma and dharma and these things. But, ultimately, a good way to say it is the non-dual nature of reality, right? What goes around comes around means that if I'm hurting somebody else, if I'm not loving somebody else, then that's probably going to come back around in some way that hurts me and keeps me from loving myself, and it may be very direct. It may be, you may hurt one person, they go hurt another person because they were hurt by you, and that person comes back and hurts you. It may be like that, and it oftentimes is much more than we're aware. But our unconscious, our subconscious mind has these higher spiritual aspirations, and it won't treat us as nicely, won't let us think as well about ourselves. And this is proven in psychology, right? So that's one aspect, and as it pertains to the illusions, how I define unconditional love in light of the illusions is realizing that whatever a human is experiencing, they are experiencing that because of causality beyond them. So their relationship, their response to stimuli, whether that's anger, frustration, depression, even wanting to kill themselves, whatever it is. We see the same thing in politics, politicians wanting to start wars and all kinds of nonsense, right? They are being affected. And I have to be able to first love them unconditionally, realizing that there is a causal chain that goes all the way back to the beginning of the universe, the beginning of God creating everything, that is playing out, that's affecting their consciousness. And that's so far beyond their control from what they've been taught, what we've been taught of how to think of causality and why things happen in the world. And this is, to me, the ultimate spiritual calling, the ultimate, even philosophical, logical, rational, calling to understand these principles and try to integrate them and walk that out in life.
All right. I mean, you're saying a lot of great stuff, but I'm not sure I understood like the response to the question I posed. Basically, I posed, the idea is like when we're tempted to hate each other because of what we say, what the other person says, and vice versa, we remember that we're just God's puppets. And so there's absolutely no rationale left for people to hate each other with this proper understanding, because it's not our fault. We're not really responsible. But nonetheless, with love, it's different. With love, I mean, fundamentally, it's the same thing. Just like we have no rational reason to hate each other because it's really God making us do and say what we're saying, we really don't have a rational reason for us to love each other based on that same truth. But here's the difference. God designed us to be hedonic creatures, to be creatures who seek pleasure and avoid pain. And it feels good to love other people and to be loved by people, right? So that's why, I mean, we can love God too. We can, yes, I mean, we can love God, basically see ourselves as God, see the other person as God and love. But that doesn't mean that we can't also love ourselves, as part of God. And also just like, because we're hardwired, it feels good. In other words, like if understanding that God governs everything will prevent us from feeling hatred, that's great, because we don't like hatred. Hatred is not good. But if we can nonetheless, just like love each other and be good to each other and just attribute, for example, if somebody does something really good, we understand it's God's doing, right? But people like to be congratulated. People like to be praised for the good that they do. So we praise them because of that. Okay, it's a kind of like, it's an irony. It's not a completely ironclad, logical kind of, construct. But the basic idea is like, we love each other, even though it's God who's pulling our strings, because it feels good to love each other.
Yeah, certainly. It's, making other people feel happy and value themselves and good about themselves and good about life, is one of the best ways for us to feel good ourselves about life and everything going on.
All right. So let's see. So all right. So again, this episode is about, the illusion of personal relational interaction. So it's not up to us. And again, like as you started out, we don't have to define it directly as God. We can define it as we're a product of how we were raised and what we've learned, what we haven't learned. But all that, we have to constantly remind ourselves that all of that is also up to God. So everything, God is everything, all right? So there's no way that anything, doesn't come back completely to God.
Yeah, definitely. And I realize this sounds so extreme in talking about we're puppets, um, and there's no free will and all of this sounds so extreme. I realize that because, just a few years ago, I would have rejected it, right? And despite my aspirations to be a good person and to do good at business and to do good at school and to be a good missionary and, to love God and all this, I failed miserably at that. Right. And I came to realize that I failed miserably, and so many of my friends and other people were failing miserably because of this false belief in these illusions. And it was such a crisis, right, to go through the process of accepting that. And I realized how extreme it sounds to so many people. And at least consider it for a thought experiment, and at least try it out. Right, next time you're in an interaction with somebody that's not going well, then just remember what George said. Oh, we're just puppets, and just go lighthearted with it and see how it works and see how it changes your ability to respond in a positive, more spiritual, godly way and love that person more. And that will speak to it more than any book you can read on the subject, more than, any scientific expert, or even any religious cleric that gets this, right? And as George is saying, it's not just about avoiding conflict. It's not just about morality. It's about happiness and potential and hedonics, right? Living the best, most fulfilled life that we can. When we start doing this, we tap in, the haters, the people who are what they call libertarians and even compatibilists who, naysay and, condemn this spiritual insight, will say, oh, if you start believing that free will is an illusion, you're going to go downhill, you're going to fail, it never works out, it doesn't matter if it's real, just pretend it's not because we're animals and we need to believe that we have free will. That's absolute nonsense. As soon as you start believing this and realizing it, recognizing it, this whole door of possibilities, this whole other universe essentially opens of a different way of thinking that allows you to tap into all of these spiritual tools, all of the spiritual knowledge, all of this ability to love yourself, love each other, and transform your life. And, I think that's what George and I are doing. We're essentially introducing, this God 3.0, this religion, this spirituality 3.0, right? There was the golden rule 1.0 that was just every religion, wanted you to just try to treat each other like you wanted to be treated and hope that worked out. Then we moved into science, even atheism, agnosticism, and that had some value. And I call that religion 2.0. Those are all religions: science, religion, psychology. These are all religions. That's 2.0. Now, the 3.0, is this radically transformational aspect that is this major shift in our consciousness, this major evolution of consciousness that's going to bring us out of the dark ages, because we still are in the dark ages until we deal with these spiritual concepts of relating to God as causal, as all of causality, as everything, and how the illusions and the insight into the illusions is the true way to have a relationship and a knowledge and awareness, a logical, rational belief with all of this. And so I just, want to encourage everybody to, to just try it out, just take a week and say, I'm going to give it a shot and see what kind of, transformation takes place.
All right, another kind of stage by stage progression occurred to me. Again, God just gave me the idea while you were talking, is that like initially God was introduced by, it wasn't Abraham really, it was this Egyptian pharaoh, Atenkanen or something like that. He equated God with the sun in a way, but basically with his conception, only he could talk to God. There was God was, this was the supreme God, but only he could communicate with God. And so like the next stage was Abraham with Judaism. And all of a sudden it wasn't just Abraham who could communicate with God. It was like pretty much everyone, right? So that was, the second stage of this, like, understanding of God. And now we are kind of like heralding in this new stage where it's not just that everyone can communicate with God, is that everyone is God. Okay, and that's powerful. And it's not like an idolatrous belief. We're not going to worship each other and ourselves, because like what's very important to remember is fine. We're all God, but we're just not the part of God that decides the slightest thing. Nothing is up to us. It's all up to like the part of God that controls everything. And we have to explore that in great detail in other episodes. But one of the advantages of this new stage of understanding of God and our relationship to God is our self-identity, upon which a lot of our feelings, respond to. It is heightened. In other words, rather than seeing ourselves as just these human beings, with whatever kind of identity we happen to construct based on who we are, who we think we are, which is it's relatively kind of modest, because we're just people. So we go from like this self-identity as people to a self-identity as God. We are God. Again, like God is expressing God through us. And that's a much healthier, much more powerful, empowering way to see ourselves. And naturally, if we equate God with goodness, which I think it's wise to, then that's going to like bring out so much more goodness in us.
Yeah, George, I I actually really appreciated what you started to get into there, and this realization of, the old religions did it one way, and then religion kept evolving, right? And this is so hard again for, many of the people I grew up around to get and appreciate, because it's actually condemned, this ways of thinking from the pulpit, very sadly, right? And for me, the major breakthrough was realizing that consciousness is evolving. We accept evolution, we realize biology is evolving, and consciousness is evolving. And this is the most underrated thing in all of science, all of evolutionary theory, is to appreciate this and realize, you know, just like God created everything and that's playing out, there's causal mechanisms that are evolving, biology and creatures evolve. Our consciousness is evolving, and this is a part of God, and our religions evolve. And, we don't apply the nonsense that we apply to this, or the doubt, to any other subject. We don't, if you're Amish or you're Mennonite and you don't drive cars, you don't use cell phones, power tools, or electricity, that's one thing. But, nobody listening is doing that, obviously, right? And I admire those people that do that a lot,
But Josh, we got about
right?
50 seconds,
Okay.
so close out the
So,
show.
yeah. So, when you start to realize that all of this contention can be, of these different ways of thinking can be resolved, and you can have a much more unified understanding of what we are, and what God is, and how to relate to it, and how to integrate these spiritual concepts, right? So what worked for the religions before, they did that for us today, and they would want us to continue to evolve and continue to grow in our spiritual understanding and our understanding of the universe and understanding of humanity and relationships, and create new religions, new spirituality that radically transforms our potential, our happiness, and our morality. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow on God.